All right, welcome friends. So this is our monthly gathering call. If you sign up for this, you might be a parent of an emotionally intense child, or you might be working with parents or emotionally intense kids yourself. So I welcome you here. I am Samantha Mo. If you haven't met me yet or don't know much about my work, I'll be happy to talk about that as this next hour together progresses. But in general, I'd like to start connecting with all of you. Many of you filled out some forms online, so I got to read a little bit about your families, number of kids, ages, special needs, why you're on this call. And so what I would love to do first, if you have the ability to type and open up the chat box, is type, first of all, where you live. That's an easy one. Kind of gets our fingers ready. I like to do these calls in a way that's interactive because in sharing my time with you people, I like to connect with people. So if we can get a little bit of conversation going as the hour progresses, I'm going to open it up for some more coaching and talking about kids' behaviors and how you're feeling in the parenting or grandparenting role. Jenny, nice to see you here. Hi. So type in the chat box where you live. Great. I see my fellow St. Paul person here, which is lovely. And the next thing to type in is, why are you here? So you can, there's a lot of things I saw on the form. There are certain things about our kids that cause us to come here: tantrums, meltdowns, diagnoses that we're looking for some hope and solutions around. We might be here for ourselves. I saw somebody wrote in like such a lovely way, looking to connect with other parents who get it, which is the point of this conversation as well, to see that you're not alone and you don't have to keep doing it alone if you've been feeling that way. Let's see, what were other reasons people are here? I've done some speaking at fetal alcohol conferences and with a lot of social workers and clinicians lately too. So if you're here because of something like that, feel free to write it. Oh, we've got a lot of Minnesota folks on today's call. Sometimes we get it all over the US. Great. And you're here for your son. Got it, Gina. Thank you. I remember reading your form. So everybody still has some time to type while they're here if they would like. And what I'm going to do is I want to set the stage for those of you who don't know me very well. Hi. I will share a little bit about my story. So back in 2004, here's a good cliffhanger. I found myself in an autism school with my hand on the door of the 3rd grade classroom. And I was dreading needing to go in and get 8-year-old Charlie. See, I had just graduated from the University of Minnesota. I had a master's degree in communication disorders. I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, only 21, like all you need is love, loving the Beatles and John Lennon. But as soon as I opened that door, Charlie, who was known for his epic meltdowns, he slunk down into his seat, turned away, pretended like he didn't see me. And I had to use all my powers of persuasion to get him out of the classroom without disrupting everybody. And as we were making the long walk down the hallway, see, my job as a speech therapist was to help him develop social skills. And what I didn't realize is that in order to teach him to talk about things, first, I needed to teach him how to stop acting things out. How do you stop acting it out and learn how to talk it out with friends and making friends? So we're 15 minutes away, or 15 steps away from my office, 10 steps, 5 steps, 4, 3, 2, 1. And Charlie does the usual, which is he has a meltdown at my feet on the floor, drops and screams, saying those things you never want to hear a kid scream at you in public with other people watching. And as I looked around at the teachers who were peering through their classrooms and their the cafeteria door, I had a moment of self-doubt where I was like, I should know better. I don't know what to do here. I don't know if I'm supposed to hold the line and pick him up and guide him to my office. I don't know if I'm supposed to be firm with him. Am I supposed to be empathetic and compassionate and sit down next to him? Should I give him the breathing ball? I was just rolling through all of these ideas in my head. And, as a 21-year-old, I wasn't sure what to do. And I tell you what, I'm 40 with a 3-year-old at home, and I still have moments like that at times. So I share this story because this is the question that we have as parents. Like, what should I do next? What needs to happen for the goals that we have for our kids? Now, to finish out that story with Charlie, I bribed him and skipped the lesson and brought him back to his classroom. But I've learned a lot of skills since then, and understand kids differently. And so all in all, when I made my way back to my own office, I was wrestling with discouragement, wondering, can I do this forever? Yeah. Is this really my life? Why did I sign up for this? And fortunately, amidst that discouragement, I heard the voice of my mom, Cheryl, in my mind, and she raised us 5 kids and 5 daycare kids. And the voice said, every child has gifts. Every child has gifts, and you can learn to draw them out. It felt painstaking. It felt effortful. I read a lot of books. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of continuing education and sensory processing and emotional regulation and chiropractic, because my husband practices that, and play therapy, to realize, like, what are we missing when it comes to kids? Like, what are we missing? Because if we can plug in a piece and understand kids differently, they're going to behave differently. And what my parent coach teacher told me back in 2012 when I was certified, so I left the field and started working with all families that have kids who are strong-willed or challenging behaviors. Many of them have some sort of diagnosis, especially these days. There's mood disorders and anxiety and gut problems, and there's so many things beyond autism, and fully apart from autism as well. And what I learned was, when you understand that what your child's behavior is showing you is fight or flight, that it is an overactive stress response, it gives us a new way to influence them. So it's not like control your kid. It's, what can I be in control of in order to stand on the shoulders of the people who did brain research and merged it with child development? Like, what can I do so that I can influence my kid's brain differently to have better regulation and better self-calming? And parenting is one of those components. There's body work, there's nutrition, there's occupational therapy, there's mental health. Like, all of those components are wonderful. But if you're here, it's because you, thank goodness, believe that there's something you can do differently. And that's my jam. So what you're gonna hear today, again, just to give you a little bit more information about myself, and then we'll move on. I've created the Mad to Glad Blueprint. So if this is your first time hearing that, it's 8 brain-based parenting tools to create more peace at home. It goes really beautifully side by side if you're working with a mental health professional. If you've read a lot of books and you have some ideas on being a kind parent and also having boundaries and positive discipline, but you're not sure how to get that to work at home with your kid. That's kind of the magic of what we can talk about and figure out on the call here. So I have prepared by reading all of your forms. We've got, 20 people or so signed up for today. July is a popular month. I offer this free gathering once a month. And it's always different based on the questions that you have. So I want to ask you, if you have a question, and thank you as you're typing in the chat box, I'll review them when I pause. If you have a specific question for me that you want us to talk about today, type it in the chat box. My role here in facilitating conversation in a safe space for parents is, yes, to provide some education and some acknowledgement for what you're going through so that you know it's real and you don't feel alone in it. But it's also the trick of answering individual questions while making it relevant for everybody. So know that when I unmute you to answer your question, or I'm riffing on it, there might be moments that I interject as a way to make sure that it's relevant for you and everybody else. Okay, great. All right, so in checking here, let me see what else. Oh yeah, so I've been doing this work 19 years, parents of emotionally intense kids, I'm trauma informed, all those good buzzwords. The Mad to Glad Blueprint is a nice staple if you have anything that's really complex going on in your family. And my goal is to help you see your kids in a way where you can influence them and make it better. All right, regulating emotions. Yay. So I didn't see questions in the chat box exactly, but I see some comments. So we've got some diagnoses that I see here: reactive attachment disorder. Shannon, I read about that. Some of the specialists you worked with. Tantrums, meltdowns, autism, how to support parents, ADHD, how to help kids regulate emotions. Very good. Yes. Less power struggles with your 18-year-old, better boundaries for yourself, better, easier relationship, and home feeling like a good place for family. So because I know Lisa and you were the first one who filled out the form that I accessed online, do you want to just chat for a little bit? And I'll create some structure around our chat.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about, and you have to practice something that in coaching we call the bottom line, which is like, give us, the story, but give it in a way where you're kind of hitting the bottom line early and we get kind of the gist of it. So tell us some of the challenges you have had as a parent and why you're here today, and you're welcome to mention how we know each other. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, it's always hard to do short, but I'm going to be short. I'll throw out one. Anyway, we came to Samantha, I don't know, years ago for help with our daughter. So my husband and I came, and it gave us some really good tools. I feel like it wasn't enough time. We really needed more time to kind of learn some things. Life is so fast. So everything is super wonderful. The lessons are great. Implementing them is not necessarily. We did get a lot out of things, but especially in the last couple of years, I know everyone says, "Oh, that's just very much a teenager," when there's a lot of yelling and screaming. But I feel like we've come into this pattern of, we have an expectation or a boundary, and she fights it tooth and nail, almost like completely oppositional, which is weird because if you knew my daughter, you would never guess that. So all the teachers, all people who know her think she's amazing and wonderful, which she is. And she just kind of regurgitates it all on us. And I'm more patient than Dan is, so they have more power struggles, but it's to the point where everything is a trigger.
Yeah.
Everything. I mean, so she's up at camp right now, being a counselor, Camp Denord, which is, I think, wonderful. And by the time she graduated, I feel like I just had a huge exhaustion and meltdown. We've had it's so reactive, it's so harsh, it's so much, and geared particularly toward me, probably because I am more patient, but I'm also more sensitive, and I don't know. Anyway, that's the gist behind
I've got it.
Like, really, just like everything possible to separate.
Yeah.
Like, I don't look in the refrigerator and I'm not going to, there's no food in here after I've gone grocery shopping, because it's not the shit that she wants to eat.
Yeah, and she acts kind of nasty towards you, and everybody's
very nasty.
surprised.
She can be mean, really mean and hurtful.
Yeah, I have a question for you. In this conversation that we're going to have here, because the whole point is like, how can we influence our kids' behavior? How can we show up as a parent?
Yes.
I have two questions. One of them is, what is happening next? Is she going somewhere now that she's graduated, or is she staying at home?
No, she's going to college.
But she's not going to be living at home?
No, just in the in-between times.
Yeah. So she's moving out. She's moving out
to go to college. Yeah.
I thought I knew that, but I wanted to just confirm that. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got that. So she's going to be at home for another month or so.
Well, she's working up as a camp counselor right now.
Oh, that's true.
At Camp Denord, and she's really wanting, she has no good judgment about timing, anything. She packs her life to the hilt so that when she comes home or does anything, everyone is dragged into her chaos. And constantly, I'm constantly trying to, I don't know.
Yeah, I hear you. So tell me if, and I can already hear how this is going to relate to other people that are on the call because I read their forms. So hang it in there with us. I'm going to provide something for all of us. So you're getting dragged into the chaos. So if you had to give me a bottom line answer, knowing everything you know about her and yourself and everything you've been through,
Mhm.
what do you want? What's your goal?
Well, my goal is to have a relationship with her that feels good. That is not driven by triggers, that she feels safe and loved, and that I feel at least respected. you know like I don't expect like great amazing connections. She's separating, but yeah, the goal is to have a more peaceful time together. So if she wants to come home for a weekend and we can all feel peaceful, not like, oh God, she's coming
Yeah,
home. Oh, I just want to run away.
it's like your hand on the doorknob. Like
Yeah,
I'm talking about.
and we're walking tiptoeing, we're walking on, what do you call that?
Eggshells.
Eggshells.
Got it. So you're already getting some acknowledgement in the comments. Shannon is hearing things that are familiar to her situation with everything
Okay.
being an argument.
Everything's an argument, every rule. Yes. So the three so simple rules that we had that she dismissed the whole last senior year, and we just got so exhausted we just didn't do it anymore. Have a shower before 10, because we all live up in this, we have one bathroom.
Tell me the
And
rules quickly, because I want to give you more information.
she has a shower by 10. Her phone and computer comes down at night, and I don't know, speak kindly.
Yeah, I've got it. Okay. So one of the things I've taken notes here because I want everybody to hear this. One of the soapboxes that I have is when other parents or professionals, even medical professionals, will say, well, that's just a teenager for you.
Right.
And for those
And
of you with young kids, you'll hear people who are trying to like just make you feel better because they love you, not because they're trying to be, rude to you, but they'll say, well, my kid has tantrums too.
Yes, and I hate that because it's not.
Yeah.
I know kids. I work with them my whole life. I've been a high school teacher. I've worked with a lot. This is way beyond that.
Yeah. And I know that it is from all of our work together. So I want to acknowledge that even for those of you who have younger kids, that when things are kind of out of the norm and really draining and exhausting, it can be controversial to hear that there might be something we're doing that's contributing to it. And not like we're being harsh and authoritarian, although some of us are, because many of us were raised like, I'm the parent, you will obey me, because we don't know what else to do, right? But what I want to share, I'm going to pull up a visual here with what you're talking about, is what we all need to understand beneath kids' behaviors. It's a starting point. I'm not going to solve everybody's problems. I have problems too. I'm not going to solve everything in this hour that we have together, but I do want to give you the starting point. So check this. Let me screen share here for you. So whenever we're talking about emotionally intense kids, I never say that's just a 4-year-old for you, or that's, oh, they're doing I just heard the word tornado. Like, oh, there's like the terrible twos, this something threes, and the tornado. I'm like, okay, let's not like have a bad word for every year of life. What's really happening from a brain science perspective is that if you've ever read the work of Dr. Daniel Siegel with the whole brain child, is he helped us bridge, he's the leading neuroscientist from UCLA, bridge the downstairs brain and the upstairs brain. So understanding what's happening in the brain and how does that impact child development and their behaviors. So the downstairs brain, feel free to type in the chat box. What do you know about this? Otherwise known as the fight, flight, or freeze response, because many of you have been in other services. So you've heard about this, you've read a book, you've listened to a podcast, type it in the chat box. So I can kind of poll you and see how much information to give or not. Okay, so if you're typing, I see little squiggle lines. So fight, flight, or freeze is the early developing part of the brain. So we need this for our safety. And if a black bear was chasing me in the woods, I would fight him back. I would flee, that's flight, or I would freeze. So I would lay down and I would play dead. And most kids who have challenging behaviors that come across as aggressive, fighting, triggering, unsafe to your body or others or items around your home, they tend to have more of this fight response. They're externalizing their behaviors rather than internalizing them into like being withdrawn, which can happen over time when some of that outward behavior or some of that outward, when some of that fight response isn't calmed down over time, it can turn into something like being withdrawn and being depressed because nothing helps their bodies or their brains to feel better. So we compare this or contrast this with the upstairs brain that's responsible for problem solving and paying attention and managing behaviors. And this might come across as good news or not, but most of the literature in parenting strategies out there from 10 years ago were upstairs brain strategies. So I know I learned 20 years ago, like, oh, if they're having a challenging behavior, like set up your sticker chart and have your reward system. And if Charlie can take 13 steps closer, give him M&M. And if he can take 12 steps closer without melting down, do this, like behavioral shaping things. But really what we know is that adrenaline and cortisol flood the brain when the downstairs is overactive. And I call this fire in the brain. So what we know when there's Sela's shouting about something in the fridge or not being in the fridge, even though it's packed, or Gina, I see you with your 5.5-year-old, you're getting aggressive behavior or body harm behavior. What that means is adrenaline and cortisol is flooding his brain, and that floods the body and it comes out in ways that can be aggressive, either with their mouth or with their limbs. And so incidentally, this is true for us too. If we tend to have more of a fight conflict personality, we might have to check ourselves to have safe bodies around children. Or if we have more of a freeze personality, which I tend to have, I have more of a harmonious pleaser, freeze, don't cause any problems personality, then what this might look like for you as a parent is you're just like me with Charlie, like, I'm not sure what to do here. And so then you really feel like you're waving in the wind when people are like, well, just hold the line and hold the boundary. Like, we got to find something that calms fire in the brain, but also helps you feel comfortable enough that your plan fits your personality. So with Sela, what I'm hearing is she's got a lot of fire in the brain. And our very first starting point always, like, what do we have control over? Is what might I be doing that's adding fuel to the fire? So for all of you, consider for a moment, and again, type in the chat box for interaction purposes, what do you think you do that adds more fuel to your child's fire? And I'm going to pull a link for you as you're talking or typing. All right, so what causes fire? Yep, so lack of routine. Gina, you know that about your kiddo. I read that your kiddo, what the truth about your child is they thrive when there's a routine and something predictable. This is true with kids who have more fire in the brain. They tend to need predictability because things feel stressful inside, kind of like at the end of the school year where we're like, what's the schedule going to be? Did we get accepted into camp? Do I need to change my work schedule? What's going to happen when there's 3 kids at home and I'm trying to work from home? Like, when there's a lot of things up in the air, if we have like our routine nailed down, and once our schedule starts getting more figured out a month later, like at the end of June, we feel calmer. The same thing is true for kids who are more aggressive or strong-willed or emotionally intense, is that they like to be able to predict things because things feel stressful inside. They have a higher baseline of stress. And that's just what adrenaline and cortisol does. So lack of routine, you're right, that can contribute to fire in the brain. Yelling, yeah, of course, we match fire with fire. Being too busy with our schedule. Oh, this one's big. It's big because in our modern world, sometimes busy is even getting our kids to fun activities. I want to take my kid to the playground and I want to take him to the pool and I want him to be in music class. And oh yeah, should we go fishing? Like there's all these things, not to mention the groceries and getting your oil changed and going to work and picking up the other kids and grocery, like not all of that. But from a psychological perspective, if like children are already expected to live in an adult world, not just all the things that we have on their plate, but keep your hands to yourself, sit still, like things that aren't their agenda, turn off that screen, sit at the table when you're eating, eat more, stop eating, like all of these things that we all go through. And what we know about kids is sometimes to calm fire in the brain, if we can do less in their schedule, so they have more downtime and you learn how to play in a way that helps them feel empowered, then yes, I'll come to you in a second, Lisa. Then what happens is it not only calms adrenaline and cortisol, but when you play, especially if it's like their interest and you're laughing, dopamine increases. And so it starts shifting the chemistry in the brain. You're starting to get dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin instead of adrenaline and cortisol. Lisa, did you want to say something?
That's what we've been struggling with her whole life, is she wants to do everything. She takes on millions of activities. So we know that it's too busy, but we get such a fight with that.
Yeah,
so even thinking about college, it's like I think I'm going to take the plan of letting go. She thinks she's going to come home like a day before college and then go to college. And I don't even feel like fighting it.
Well,
because,
and she's at the age where there's going to be natural learning. People like to say natural consequences, and like that's a thing. That's real. But like natural learning is going to happen, and that's the right thing to happen as long as it's in a category where she's not going to get damaged or lose all of her money or something like that.
But
yeah. Well, and so it brings up another conversation, and then I'll go back to some of these other ways we add fuel to the fire. And that is that because we're in modern culture that's very fast paced and full and very busy, we have a baseline of stress naturally. So it's like if you're really grounded, let's say the fire in your own brain is calm, there's not a lot of adrenaline going on. But if you're type A, people pleasing, perfectionist tendency helper, like I am, then I'm like doing all these things and all this work and helping people and responding to my family and taking care of my kid and like all of these things. Well, now one of my health coaches who I'm signed up for calls it adrenaline addiction. And she's like, all of you adults have adrenaline addiction. You're trying to fit all of this stuff in. And to translate this over to children, if they naturally feel higher stress inside, then they're gonna try to keep themselves busy to not feel that stress, just like all of us do. And we can't really reason with them like, you're too busy, you got to slow down. Like that doesn't work. Or talking to them about adrenaline addiction is just gonna like create an argument. So I don't recommend that. But what was I gonna say? Adrenaline addiction. So why do kids have such a need for high intensity adrenaline and drama? So the way, Lisa, you're describing it is in staying busy. I sometimes, like some of my friends with ADHD will procrastinate and do things at the very last minute. Like, oh my gosh, I got to leave for the airport in 3 hours. I'm leaving for a week. I'm going to start packing now.
Yeah, it sounds like
because the adrenaline can like get you going and gear you up and help you get organized and get something done.
That's very much feel it. Yes.
Yeah. So with emotionally intense kids, thinking about those of you with the preschoolers on the call here, or the school age kids, this can happen because of their neurodiversity. So sometimes kids have sensory processing disorder or sensory challenges. And if the noise is just coming in too loud all the time, it's like adrenaline is building up inside of them and they're trying to like sit in their chair and not lash out and not yell because they're going to get kicked out of school. It's like, but if we can calm some of the sensory and we can like create routine for them so that they know what to expect and it's not so assaulting for their bodies and their brains. Like this is the mindful aspect of parenting. How do I help my kid feel more comfortable, and what do they need? What is their behavior telling me? The other thing, because I know sensory showed up on these 20 forms or whatever that I received before today's call. The other thing that showed up was trauma. And so when there is medical or physical or sexual trauma, then it raises the baseline level of adrenaline and cortisol, because now the brain is like, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I going to survive? Am I going to survive? And I think I heard something like the brain does that 4 times every second. And so I know, not to overshare, but I know that what we're talking about, why might Sela have adrenaline addiction and be operating at this high intensity, there's something she might still need to work out from her earlier years. It needs to heal still. So is that parenting? And I'll have you comment in a second. Yes, it's parenting. Some of it, like, you don't want to add to it and you want to create a safe space, but you also need boundaries. So it doesn't mean you have to tiptoe all the time,
Right.
but it also means she's on a journey of healing through that. And so other resources are needed as well. Did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I mean, and we've recognized this for a long time. And finally, she started to do some counseling, and I think that's been good. But that's what it is. It's like a medical trauma, which affected her and all of us. And but she's very resistant to. I don't think she is ready to look at it yet.
Yeah. So now we look at, how do we empower ourselves? If we look what's beneath the behavior, and if some of what I'm saying is resonating, like Ginny's got some lovely exclamation points. I approve. I love exclamation points. Trauma, adrenaline addiction.
That's good.
Like, if we know this to be true, and maybe this gets kind of esoteric, but it's like, so who do I need to be as a parent in the meantime, when we can't control our kids? Like, what space do I need to hold? And so one of the things that helps you go to bed at night and not feel like, man, I sucked that part of the day, like, that doesn't make me feel good. Like, if we get simple in that way, one of the things that we can consider is, did I refrain from matching fire with fire? And the natural next question, and I'm not going to have you comment on this, Lisa, but I want everybody to reflect on this. Knowing your fuel that you add to the fire, if your goal is things to be more peaceful, what do you need to do to not fuel the fire? So let's have everybody who wants to type it in the chat box. What do you need to do? Like, what's fueling your kids' fire. What do you need to do differently? Yeah, I mean, COVID was a trauma. I had my kid August 2020, so I get that. It's trauma for kids. It's mental illness, mental health challenges for a lot of parents, kids. Yeah, being sick, so prenatal. So there could stress with that in utero. Yeah, so what do we do if we can't go back? Right? And so one of them is, oh, well, how about I don't yell? Okay, well, if you don't yell, if we walk this back even further, what do you need in order to not yell? What will help? Think of a time in the past when you successfully refrained from yelling. What were the circumstances that allowed that to happen? I'm thinking of spring break. Somebody was, I know we're in summertime, but a mom that's coming to my mind. She's been solo parenting after a divorce a year ago, and she has 3 kids under the age of 7. And she's like, I did it. I didn't yell. I'm like, well, what's different? She's like, I went on spring break by myself for 3 days. So what is the nugget of truth here? Instead of somebody just saying, like, do positive discipline, do self-care, like, what is the nugget of truth that's real for your family? Yeah. So Lisa, you might have something, because you said need to not tell her what to do and trust she'll figure out. You need to unhook. Yeah. And I don't have, it's unhooking.
And that's a better way than saying detaching, because I'm trying to figure out how to unhook love her and be okay without me going, well, you're gonna have any time to do it, right? I mean, unhook.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that.
Let go of perfectionism.
Let go.
Unhook and let go with love. I'm seeing what Gina's saying here. Take breaks, tap out, deep breaths. Yeah. Yeah. In my family, the code word is, well, it's not our family, it's me. I'm like, I'm cooked. Mom needs to leave the room. Dad needs to step in. And we do that well. Let me go back up because I see John and Mary typing too, and I appreciate that. Mary, you're talking about getting away from the situation and calm yourself instead of reacting. Yeah. Yeah. And for some kids, if there's some attachment disruption or anxiety, or they're young, I mean, a good common practice for most families and kids is to say, I need to take a break and we'll circle back. I'll come back. Like, kids need to know that. It's good to step away, and it's good to let them know you're going to step away. John's saying, when I get so mad that I want to roar, I'll take a deep breath and count to 4, like I tell my kid to do. I hear a little bit of Daniel Tiger in there. That's right. So 4 breaths. We're going to do that for a second here. Okay, so I want you to picture your recent trigger moment, like really picture it for yourselves. I'm picturing it too. Oh, yesterday. Okay, got it. 3-year-old tantrum, throwing things. Don't talk to me. Don't touch me. Don't go away. That's what he's telling me. Okay, so picture your trigger situation. And then if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, do it for real. And take 4 breaths at your own pace. Okay. That took me 19 seconds to take 4 breaths. So it's this mindfulness practice of being aware of your trigger and what you're in control of, and you can be in control of taking 19 seconds worth of breath. And what that does is, does it fix the situation? Will my 3-year-old stop throwing things? No, because I was doing that and it lasted for 19 more minutes. But it gives you a tool to not add fuel to the fire. So we're going to layer some more pieces in here, but I want to check on folks. Mom rage is real. I know, it sure is. Yeah, parent rage. Thanks for the Daniel Tiger confirmation, John. Random rage story. I suspected I was pregnant about like the day after I got pregnant. And 3 weeks later, I was complaining about everything. This is going on with my team, and this is going on with my family, and this is going on with my whatever. And pregnancy was confirmed by somebody external. That wasn't just me. And I had this moment where I'm like, oh, is that why I'm filled with rage? Like, something literally happened hormonally 3 weeks into pregnancy where I felt rage for the first time in my life. My sister was like, I think you feel rage. I'm like, what's that? And it's not that we don't, like, it's not something to be ashamed about. It's just like, oh, okay. It's if you've ever heard the analogy of all of the emotions in the bottle, and that if you have the cork on, like, I'm trying not to feel rage, try not to boil over, because that was the model set for me when I was a kid, was the rage would boil over. So I was like, okay, swallow it down, repress it, suppress it. But, once you take that cork off and you feel rage, if you can embrace that, you also feel some of the things that feel better. You also get to feel joy. You get to feel some of that effusiveness in your life. So that's really a tangent, but okay, other triggers. And then I have another thing I want to share with everybody. How else do we trigger? Yeah, so I see a message about how not to let your child's actions trigger you as a parent and stay calm yourself, so the situation doesn't escalate to screaming. So Mary, you have to answer that. What helps you be successful in not yelling and escalating? I like this. I'm a believer in a philosophy called Kaizen. It's 2 Japanese words squished together. That means change in small ways. And Toyota was known in the 80s as having the most efficient assembly line for cars. And what they would do whenever there was, if you think about the assembly line, whenever there was something down the line that was wrong, they would stop the whole production and they'd go back and spend all that time and lost time and money until they fixed that thing. And then they would get production line going again instead of like, fix the problem here and now fix it here again and now fix it further downstream. So if we're getting to that point where we're escalating to screaming, there's two things I want to consider. One is what needs to happen further up the line. Like if you look backwards, did you have low blood sugar? Did you feed yourself well? Did you rest? Did you call in other help? And for some of us, none of those things are possible. So it's like, this is where I'm asking you the question, what can you do? Because I don't have your answer. And for a lot of families, since there's quite a few of you that are raising children with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, respite and needing time away is a real thing. And it's really scary because your kid's really intense. And it's like, how do I trust them with somebody else that they're not going to harm them and that they'll be safe themselves? And I'm saying this because it's not always a light switch, like, oh, great, I'm going to find some respite, a PCA, another care provider, but knowing like, okay, that's the goal of something we're moving towards in the next 6 months or a year. The other thing I want to share is sometimes when we evaluate ourselves and we say, oh, okay, I needed to sleep well. I needed to take that hour to myself on the weekend, even though I don't know what else to do. And so then I did chores. Like, okay, no, actually take the hour to yourself and lay like a starfish on the floor and listen to calming music to give your stress response, the stress in your brain, a different physical experience. You got to repattern yourself too. When you look at all of that and you're like, something's still off. It's not just that I need to not fuel the fire. Oftentimes it's, and what tool do we need? So you might need something like how to create an optimal daily routine. You might need a tool if you're feeling really confused about what triggers fire. Like what's positive discipline that your kid will buy into and will actually work, so they reset, so that their breaks last 30 seconds or 2 minutes instead of long, extensive, frequent meltdowns. And so those are all the tools that I talk about in Mad to Glad. So if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, is she gonna offer us something that can help us longer term, that's available, and we can talk about it more towards the end of this call. But the other point is sometimes when we've nailed parenting and we're like, I'm creating calm, I'm creating safety, I've got a strong relationship with them, I know how to structure the day, I know how to label their emotions and give them space to process. Sometimes you also need occupational therapy. If your kid has sensory issues, they need to work with the occupational therapist to do reflex integration and calm down the Moreau reflex, which is like the startle response of everything bothers me, everything bothers me, everything bothers me, that just didn't naturally integrate when they were younger for whatever reason. Who knows? For whatever reason, right? So if that's a resource you've been considering, those go in conjunction with shifting your parenting. So for anybody who's like, I'm getting well-meaning advice, like my kid has meltdowns too, and you're suspecting something different, take a step of evaluation. Take him to the chiropractor. See if there's something going on where they can't pause and hit the brake pedal in their nervous system. And you're just always going to hear holistic things from me because I'm married to a chiropractor. So I honor those things as well. I think they're really powerful. Let's see. What else? Any comments or questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I know I promised one more thing and I will still get to it, but it's a good time for reflection too. Yeah, how do you embrace rage? Good question. I did a meditation once on that. It was out in California when I worked at the autism school. And the 40-minute meditation was one where they had loud pumping music and you would like pound pillows for 20 minutes and then you'd stand still for 10 minutes and then you'd, I don't know what you did, put a smile on your face while you stood still for 10 minutes too. Something like that. So embracing rage sometimes is getting into full supported experiences, emotional experiences, yoga, meditation. Rage isn't a meditation. My colleague, Kathy Flaminio, who created Move Mindfully, I love her app. It's like $10. Move Mindfully has tools to increase focus, increase calm, decrease hyperactivity. And it's purchased by school districts and a lot of teachers and also like parents. And what you can do is it will show you, like, if I'm feeling angry, what can I do? And there are certain poses where there's a wood chopper pose where if I stood up and I like bend at the waist and I'd go, huh, and I'd bend over as if I'm chopping wood. The way you experience and embrace rage is that you actually let it move through your body in a way that's helpful, not harmful. And when Mason was probably only like a month or 2 months old, and my child, who's 3, was born with some birth trauma. We had a home birth with a midwife at home and a doula, and it was 30 hours of posterior labor. And when he came out, he had this really shrieky pain cry, is what they called it right off the bat. And he cried for 4 months, and we just didn't know what it was. And on the first night, my husband and I, second night, we looked at each other and we're like, this is the work we've been doing with families who are like totally cooked and totally burnt out. Their kids are screaming all the time. Like we know it from 20 years, 18 years of experience, but we didn't have that physical experience of, throughout the night and everything. And so I called Kathy, and she's like, if you ever have weird thoughts, let me know that it's okay. Reach out. And so I was like, I'm walking in the woods with my baby in the baby carrier. He's safe, but I keep having these, my arm keeps wanting to like throw. They want to throw. And it wasn't like I want to throw my child, even though, like I know that this happens. And these thoughts happen. And that's why I talk about them, because they happen. But what she told me to do is she's like, you actually need to do this thing where you throw your arms out. So keep him in the baby carrier. And when you're walking through the woods, like get that to move through your body. So that's my non-mainstream answer of how to embrace rage, Gita. Helpful or not, I don't know. Yelling in the car, John. Yeah, for sure. Pounding the steering wheel. It's actually like expressing it. I love that. Okay. Other thing I promised. We got about 10 minutes left here. Other thing I promised. Okay. So Lisa gave us a good setup here talking about her child. And I want to empower you all with one more tool of what to do. So we talked about fire. We talked about understanding when you can be in control of yourself, but not your kid. You might need to unhook and just realize, even for little kids, when we unhook, it's like, oh, I can hold space and not add fuel to the fire, and realize like this is maybe normal is the wrong word, but like to be expected. Like big behaviors are also to be expected while we're like figuring things out on the journey alongside them. So we don't have to fix it right away or make them go away or make it stop. I just had a moment of like counseling to myself. We don't have to fix it or make it go away or make it stop. It's like what you are responsible for is don't add fuel to the fire, and like recognize that when kids are having big emotional experiences, they're stuck actually in their right brain. So Dr. Daniel Siegel describes this as well. And this is in contrast to where we like to operate with our left brain, which is very logical and language and linear and organized. And so when our kids are having this big emotional experience, instead of like when Mason threw the stool in the bathroom when he was really upset for 20 minutes yesterday, I practiced calm. It wasn't enough because like it just wasn't enough. So what else do we layer on? Because most of us know a few good tools, but we need to layer in pieces in order to help our child develop self-regulation skills. And it was that he was having a big feeling. His nanny, who we hire 2 days a week to be in our house, gave him an old mobile phone that kind of like slides over and then you can push all of the buttons. And he's 3 and we don't have any screens. We don't have screen time at home. And so he was loving it, and I wouldn't let him hold it in his crib in his bed when he naps, because the rule is whenever he's asking for something, I'm like, well, is it hard or is it soft? Hard. Okay, then you can't sleep with it. And when he woke up after a 3-hour nap, he just went right into, he'd been so tired, he fell right to sleep, but then he went right into this rage of, why can't I hold this phone? And he's throwing stuff. And I don't see this behavior from him frequently. But what he needed was me to acknowledge his emotion. So sometimes behavior gets loud and turned up because it's the right brain is like, hear me, see me, hear me, see me. Now, in the first 20 minutes, when I tried saying things like, you were mad, you really wanted your phone. This is called emotional attunement. It's a very good skill to have when you have a kid with big emotions. But the other thing that will happen is that kids who have big emotions, you have to find the time of day where they let it in. So in that 20-minute experience, he wasn't having it. I can see you're really mad. So Lisa, I'm sure you've done this with Sela where you're like, I know you're upset about this. I understand. I hear you. And then if she keeps spiraling and escalating upward, then that's not the moment. Then what they just need is for you to be calm and unhook and like hold space for them. Yeah, right. So I'm sharing this because to show you the visual, we're all, if you're 25 or 30 or older, then you're going to operate more from your left brain because your brain's fully integrated, your right and left side. But kids don't integrate the emotional and logical part of their brain till 25 to 30. So even if you're like, I have a big kid, he's 14, like, yeah, he's got a long way to go until he's making integrated choices. That's my nice way of saying, I remember when my brother was 19 and he'd drive around at nighttime with his friends in his little Buick, or it was like a Honda Civic, his little beater car. And they'd like go and knock over the empty plastic recycling bins around the street. Like, they drive their car into it, like probably not a really good integrated choice. So if you know a 19-year-old that was like that, like, yeah, you're 14-year-old, you're 11-year-old, you're 5-year-old, they're going to need a lot more years of guidance in order to integrate their emotions with what do I do next? How do I reason myself through this? So remembering to meet your kids where they're at emotionally and acknowledge it in the moments where they can let it in, and instead of holding a grudge, because sometimes they're starting to open up and we're like, oh, no, you don't. I'm not softening to you. Like, well, you can do that, but then they're going to hold a grudge and you're going to hold a grudge. And if there are moments of softness where you can say, that was really hard. I noticed you were mad. That was really hard. How do you think I felt? You're mad. You were yelling at me. Yeah, I was mad too. Like finding ways of opening up that emotional conversation is really healing. And there was a family, one of the parent was an MD, and then the mom was a professional musician. When they reached out, their kid was 9 and they were really aggressive. I think he had pandas pans. He'd gotten a tick bite and he just like suddenly went crazy is how they described it. And that's really common in pandas pans, is like there's some sort of really intense gut inflammation. And so even if you use really good behavior strategies and mental health therapy strategies, until you heal the gut, the same neurotransmitters and fire in the brain, it's a mirror image in the gut. So if the gut is having a hard time, then the brain's going to have a hard time too. And so kids think they're just bad, naughty, mean, mad people when really their gut's off. And I'm happy to send more resources. If anybody has a question, let me know. hello@SamanthaMo. You can email me.com. If you want those resources, I'll send you a webinar. But what am I saying? Gut. What was I saying? I really lost it. I just had too long of a lead in. Oh, you're muted, Lisa.
Pandas and you were.
Oh yeah, family. Yep. So the 9-year-old, thank you. And so when they contacted me, it's because they'd seen mental health therapists individually and as a couple and for their kid. But then they couldn't get him to keep going. So like, I don't know, last straw, let's try parent coaching. And sometimes people think that way because parent coaching is an out-of-pocket service. Insurance doesn't cover it because we're working on parents without a necessary medical diagnosis, but like flex spending and, there's payment plans and all of that can cover it. But he had thrown a suitcase over the banister and luckily nobody was walking underneath it, but they were like, oh my gosh, our kid is really going to hurt somebody. And when they learned what I just told you about with the right and left brain, and they learned to not add fuel to the fire and acknowledge emotions. I know at the beginning of our 6-month coaching program, they said, do you think we need a therapist? I'm like, can you get him to therapy? No. Okay. Well then, no, don't try. Don't disrupt your relationship with him to try force him to do something that he's just going to clam up at. And we started working on the strategy, and Dad's like, do you think like he's actually opening up to us? Do you think we're going to need therapy after this? I'm like, I don't know, like let's monitor and see what happens. And at the end of the 6 months, they had created such a bond and a way of talking about things that were hard that they decided he didn't need therapy because they were having those conversations and he was talking it out rather than acting it out. So, this whole call is designed to help you feel not alone. Hopefully you understand your kid differently or better. Hopefully you feel inspired, like, oh, like there's something you can do as a parent to make it better, whether that's something like a parent coaching program or another resource that feels relevant to you right now. Does anybody want to hear about what parent coaching looks like? Does that feel relevant for anybody? Because if you all feel complete for now, I can also just let you go. Okay, I see a private. Thank you for that private message. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. Thanks. So if you feel like you wanted to head out, you're welcome to. I can send a PDF of what parent coaching, what my programs look like. And you can read it on your own if you feel like you absorb better that way. And I'll just say goodbye for now. And otherwise, the way that my parent coaching program works is you learn the Mad to Glad Blueprint curriculum. So they are the 8 tools. Let me show them to you for creating more peace at home. And I run a cohort. I have a cohort coming up in October because I run it twice a year. And so the way that it works is you learn one of these skills a week over 8 weeks, how to calm the fire, how to avoid fire starters. And there's live coaching every single week on a group call like this, so that once you've learned the topic in depth, I can take you through a reflection and customization activity to make sure it works in your family. And you can ask questions. And I've got Mad to Glad certified mentor coaches in the program. So there's Facebook Q&A every single day throughout your program. And you start layering in calming the fire in your kid's brain. Then we work on emotional connection strategies in this middle level. And then finally, we move our way up to kind of like the standard parenting things, like how do I set boundaries? Get a good routine, positive discipline, teach my kid to resolve conflict. But those just are built on shifting sand if you don't have the 4 pillars that lead up to that. So if you're interested in something like that, the 8 pillars are pre-recorded. And so you listen to one of the modules and then you join for the live coaching calls. After that 8 weeks is done, you get 4 more months of support. Because I find that at the end of 8 weeks, parents are like, oh, I just have to have good willpower and repeat the pillars again. I'm like, okay, nobody wants to do that. That's terrible. That sounds terrible to me. I don't learn that way. So in the next 4 months, we do twice a month calls. So anybody who's been through your current cohort that will be happening in the fall or a previous cohort, they're on these Mad to Glad community calls where I create a structure and I give you an overview starting from the beginning of pillar 1. And then we do reflection and integration activities so that when it's a new season, when your kid's a new age, you get to grow your parenting skills and you learn the whole program twice in a way that's not too intensive. And you don't get burnt out. You get to have more relationships with people in the community as well. For folks who decide they want a seat in the October cohort, we have early access. So that just means right now it's summertime. If you wanted to join the program, we give you all of those 8 pillar modules right now and invite you to our twice-month community calls now. So you can do a little bit, you can do a lot, but we'll officially guide you through starting at pillar 1, starting in October. So we just gift that to you. And I don't know, it's like a $700 value or something like that. So to give you the visual of what this looks like with our October cohort, it's specially designed for parents of emotionally intense kids. We call it Mad to Glad Plus. Runs 8 weeks and then twice monthly for 4 months. All the classes are recorded. If you can't make it live, you can always submit questions ahead of time. So you get instant access to all the modules immediately, plus community calls. You get a seat in the next cohort with coaching customization. And then most parents will say that they start seeing changes because we start with calm the fire and don't add fuel to the fire within the first couple weeks. The cost of this program is $330 a month for 6 months. So if we start in October, then you would have October, November, December, January, February, March. You'd have support through spring break, March, April, if you wanted to see some changes in your family. Let me see if I can pull this link for you too. So if this is something you're interested in signing up for, I will put the link in the chat box. Everything's hooked up. So if you're interested, it gives you instant access to everything immediately. Or if you feel like you wanted to have a conversation with me to run through what's happening in your family and see if it's a good match, I do free 30-minute calls. So just go to my website, samanthamoe.com, parents. I'll put that in the link too in the chat. You can schedule a call with me and there's no obligation. It just lets us talk about what are the behaviors in your family and can this support you. So Mary, your questions are coming direct message to me privately, but I'll answer them out loud. As far as the ages, my specialty, if it's your first time in the program, is working with families of kids who are ages 3 to 13 cognitively. So if you start having some special needs in there, then oftentimes it works up into, FASD or ASD. I've worked with families that have kids who are 21 and 22 years old to give you some parenting tools to help them calm. And then I think I answered, there's not exactly a summer program, but you get involved in my twice monthly calls in the whole program up front, but then we'll run it in October officially where I'm leading it. And then my program for professionals, I see that as well, Mary, is a licensing program and certification. So for those of you who feel like you want to maybe work at an OT clinic, or you work with parents as a pastor, or you work at a mental health clinic, you can get certified to teach my 8-week program on site. So this is just a way to bring it more into the community and create in-person relationships with parents who you're already serving, but in a group setting. So I would do training where you get the facilitator guide that's 100 pages and parent workbooks are 50 pages and there's 8 slide decks to be able to teach the program. If you're interested in that, you'll need to schedule a call with me through my website on the professional page, because I'd love to learn about your work goals. We're running a cohort this fall simultaneously. So you can learn the parenting tools for yourself and apply them in your family. And that's looking like it's going to be a Wednesday call. And then the professional call looks like it's going to be a Friday call, where we begin analyzing, when you teach this material, what creates openings and ahas for parents and what creates road bumps that you need to help coach them through. So if you're interested in that licensing, we can certainly talk about that as well, because I have some spots open. Thank you for asking. Other questions? Otherwise, I'll do a lovely wrap up for all of us today. Or comments. What's your takeaway? That's what I want to hear. Type in the chat box or feel free to unmute. What was valuable about today's call? Yeah, you're welcome. I see that message. Yeah, Mary, I offer help in the professional program. I'm the lead instructor in everything that we do. I like it, Lisa. A reminder to unhook. Start there. Lovely. Let me see if I pull the quote. Sometimes I pull quotes for things. You know what? I'm going to wrap up with my mom's, because her voice is in my head. The voice of every child has gifts, and that you can learn to draw them out has really stuck with me. I was asked today when I was doing an in-service for inpatient mental health clinicians. They had me do a presentation on Zoom, and they've got kids in dorms that have challenging behaviors, and they're trying to reunify them, give them skills to reunify and go home to their adoption families. And they said, well, why are you working with parents? And I said, well, I loved working with kids and I appreciate the work that you all are doing. And it's one thing that it can feel like a compliment to be a child whisperer. But for me, my heart really goes towards the parents, because I can see what that struggle and that suffer looks like. And like, it's just a given that I love kids, but the fact that I love parents is what really puts me into this parent coaching role. So I'm glad, Jenny, that you see the reminder that we have a part to play in the responses we get from our kids. Yeah, we have a part we play. And like, not to overburden ourselves either, to say we're everything. Like, we have a part and other resources are often needed. John, I see you saying working on skills you want to model for your kiddo. Great. The program that's best for parents, Mary, is my October cohort. Yeah, because it has all of the self-paced learning starting this summer if they want it. And then the guided support from myself as a coach and 3 mentor coaches. So that's definitely the way to go. All right. Well, thank you all for your time. Hopefully you hear my mom, Cheryl Sawyer's voice in your head today. You can make it better. I host these calls every month and I never know how it's going to roll. It's going to have something similar always, I think, where we're talking about fire in the brain because we need to go there. But if I see you there again, you'll be welcome. I will enjoy seeing you. And otherwise I will maybe see you in one of my programs. Have a great day. Thanks for coming.
Bye.